Hello out there, weirdos. It's Lindsey B. Goddard, and I'm here to wish you a happy Easter. Although, by the time you're listening to this, I'm sure your Easter is probably over. But I'll tell you what, I have worked my little bunny tail off getting this episode together for you, and I'd love for you to give it a listen. It's all about weird spring and weird Easter, and I just know you're gonna love it. And don't forget, if you're curious about all the weird stuff we get up to, you can always check it out at weirdwideweb.org. Now, on to these 4 weird Easter stories. Yolk of the Gods by Erin Banks. The coastal town of Charbots lay where the Baltic Sea's waves caressed the shore, a place where the charm of old mingled with the sleek polish of new. Among its beachfront promenades and vacation rentals, remnants of an older world still clung to the landscape. Quaint houses, winding paths, and the quiet embrace of forested stretches that had seen centuries pass. Here, the Maiden's Walk had long been observed, though the memory of its purpose had faded into mere tradition, and tradition, in turn, into inconvenience. This year, however, the inconvenience turned into a dispute. Fewer young women volunteered to make the moonlit journey into the forest, and murmurs arose. Perhaps the old ways had finally withered. Yet, Mayor Tammo Thiessen grew anxious. He alone among the council treated the matter not as a formality, but as an imperative. His voice, typically measured, had acquired an edge of urgency, even panic. "We must not forsake the old ways," he insisted. "A village without its traditions is a body without a soul." And so the tradition continued. A girl was chosen, Gesha, 17, with dark blonde hair and eyes the color of the frozen sea in winter. At dusk, she stepped onto the well-trodden path into the woods, as generations had before her. She did not return. The police were summoned, their flashing lights and pressed dark blue uniforms, a stark contrast against the village's muted palette. Search parties scoured the forest, yet no trace of Gesha was found. "We must send another," Mayor Thiessen still declared, against all reason. They chose Finya, who disappeared, prompting the police to ban any further maidens' walks. And yet, the townspeople, incited by Mayor Thiessen, decided to send 2 more, Wiebke and Rike. Neither returned. The authorities intervened, patrolling the streets and implementing a curfew. No more young women would be offered to the woods. The matter was now one of criminality, not folklore. The town complied, or so it seemed. But belief is a peculiar thing, and the tendrils of it are never truly severed, running through the soil, the dirt mankind is made of. And so a pair of twins vanished while on their way home from their choir practice. Several more followed, neither of whom was last spotted anywhere near the forest. 9 days before the Easter celebration, 9 young women were missing. Fear gripped Charbots in a way it had not for centuries, and whispers arose when the disappearances stopped. 9. The sacred Germanic number. 9 worlds that housed 9 races of creatures. Gods, wights, humans, giants, dwarves, and several more. 9 main deities. Was it a sign? But of what? Still, the villagers clung to their customs. They gathered for their annual Easter egg hunt, venturing into the woods in pairs, seeking comfort neither in law nor common sense, but in ritual. The first to stumble upon something unusual were the Jansen children, whose joyous shrieks faltered into silence at the sight before them. A great egg lay half buried in the loam, its shell marred with cracks, leaking something dark and viscous. Then, motion. A twitch, a pulse, a shudder. An arm emerged from the rupture, slick with dark red blood. Fingers flexed, gripping the damp soil, and then it began to crawl. Not blindly, not in aimless spasms, but with intent. It moved toward them. Screams rang out. People ran, but the forest was alive with screams, a cacophony of terror as more eggs were discovered, each birthing something grotesque. Severed legs, half a torso, and then another. Hands, another arm, a head, 9 limbs in total. Each part herded the people toward the clearing at the heart of the woods, an unseen force pulling them together with purpose. There, before the horrified eyes of Sharbotes' people, the disparate limbs found one another, fusing, knitting flesh and sinew as though they had never been parted. What rose was a woman, tall, radiant, terrible. Her skin bore the hue of dawn's first light. Her hair cascaded like spun gold, and her eyes, vast and ancient, reflected the wisdom of a time before time. The villagers dropped to their knees, some in awe, others in dread. Mayor Thiessen, trembling, stepped forward. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why now? We have observed your rites for so long, yet you never came." The goddess tilted her head, considering him as one might a curious insect. Then she spoke. "You worshipped foreign gods and forgot about the gods of the land. You worshipped capitalism and then yourselves by way of social media." Her voice was the rustling of leaves in the spring breeze, the whisper of roots burrowing deep beneath the soil. When tradition became superstition, we could return. Belief creates reality. Your fear, your reverence, it has made me flesh once more. From the shadows of the trees, something stirred. The forest itself exhaled. Roots burst forth from the ground, tendrils of ivy and thorn coiling around the villagers. They gasped, struggling, but the vines found their mouths, their throats, their chests. Blood welled, seeping into the soil, staining the earth a deep, sacrificial red. One by one, the bodies crumpled. The clearing was silent but for the crackle of a newly lit fire. Easter raised her arms to the heavens, palms open, summoning forth the might of the skies. A lightning bolt shot down into the body of one of the villagers, and Saznotas, the Sky Father and true All-Father of the northern peoples, rose in the form of another. Lightning shot out of his hands, striking the other villagers with a jagged lance of white-hot fury, and in its wake, the fallen bodies rose. No longer were they villagers. Their forms shifted, transfigured. Their eyes burned with the light of forgotten suns. Thunar clenched his fists, summoning his mighty hammer. Baldar stretched his limbs, the golden glow of his return casting warmth over the clearing. Gifjon, Loki, Freya, Baduhina, Njord. One by one, the old gods stood once more upon the earth that had forgotten them. In the distance, a tsunami rose, rebirthing Ran, goddess of the sea. Easter smiled. Spring had come, and the gods with it. They would raise the old world to raise the new. New Beginnings and Bitter Ends by J. L. Lane. The dining table was adorned with a bounty of eggs, artfully stacked upon one another, awaiting the arrival of the children, poised to feast until their stomachs felt ready to burst. Baskets, overflowing with Easter chocolates and delightful jelly confections, were filled to the brim, their wicker handles intricately spiraled with vibrant designs. Madison dreaded the task of cleaning up the nests of tissue paper that would be torn from the bottom of each basket, along with the scattered wrappers and gleaming foils. However, she felt relieved that, at least, it wasn't the dreaded Christmas wrapping paper. The holidays had been challenging to navigate alone with 4 children. Each early morning, as she watched the blackened sky be gently awakened by the sun casting its warm glow upon it, she found herself lost in thought. Each ray of light sparked reflections of how profoundly different these celebrations would feel had her husband, Steve, been by her side. A part of her ached with the sorrow of his absence, while another simmered with resentment for the void he left behind when he passed, burdening her with the responsibility of caring for 4 children under the age of 16. The children had been challenging even before their father's tragic accident. However, since the funeral, each one had unraveled in their own distinct way, exposing the depths of their trauma. Their misbehavior was becoming increasingly overwhelming, not only for Madison, but also for those around them. The school had referred them to therapy, and neighbors frequently voiced their concerns about the children's antics while playing outside. Among the most outspoken was Albert, the elderly man next door who had scolded Madison on several occasions. He insisted that she needed to discipline the children more strictly and suggested that a man was necessary in her life to provide the father figure they lacked. He often made pointed remarks, claiming that mothers tend to be too lenient on the young. So, it was hardly unexpected when CPS made contact back in January. Now, just 6 months after the loss of her husband, she felt herself struggling to stay afloat in the turbulent waters, all whilst dealing with a social worker who intruded upon her life incessantly. She knew it was Albert who had called them, but there was nothing she could do about it. Any type of retaliation would have caused him to become even more unbearable towards her and the children. Holidays were the only time the social worker would leave her and the children alone, aside from dropping off a small budget gift the day before. This time, it consisted of inexpensive candy eggs, likely made from cooking chocolate, which would end up scattered on the floor by the day's end, each with a single bite taken out of them. She found it perplexing that the social worker thought she needed this kind of help. She had already purchased a mountain of treats for the occasion and a feast's worth of food for the roast dinner she was preparing. A succulent leg of lamb was already slow roasting in the oven, filling the home with its mouth-watering aroma, while an array of vibrant vegetables floated in pans of salted water atop the stove, waiting for their moment to be cooked. She sat in the front room, enjoying the peace before the children woke and came charging down the stairs. She rested in her favorite chair situated by the bay window, savoring the cup of coffee she held with both hands while gazing out into the street. The sun had now begun to peer above the rooftops as she observed the morning shift workers groggily climbing into their cars to start their daily commute. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Albert shuffling down his front path, shaking his head and muttering to himself as he went to retrieve his morning paper. She had often seen him scolding the paperboy for not tossing the newspaper onto his porch. Each morning, she would chuckle to herself as she watched the boy drop it right at the edge of Albert's property, a cheeky grin playing on his face every time. It was entertaining to see the young lad find amusement in his spiteful antics. Albert certainly deserved it for being so vicious to everyone. Each morning, Sheila, who lived just across the street, would typically be watching with a joyful smile on her face also. However, this morning was different. Though she perched by her window as usual, her demeanor was far from joyous. Instead, her eyes flared with indignation as she directed a fierce glare at Albert. Madison was aware that they had clashed the previous day, stemming from Albert's complaints to the HOA regarding Sheila's unconventional Easter decorations. While Madison found it odd that Sheila adorned her porch with small animal bones and dried blooms, she appreciated the old woman's uniqueness. In truth, Albert was the only neighbor who seemed to take any issue with it. He would frequently be hurling shouts like, "Witch! Witch!" at her, as if they were back in Salem and he was trying to put her on trial. Both of them were of similar age and had been the longest standing residents on the street, each believing they were the neighborhood guardian. Sheila had lived there her entire life, as the house had belonged to her parents before her. Albert, on the other hand, moved into his home in his early 20s with his first wife. She left him within 3 years and is following 2 unions unraveled just as swiftly. His last wife, Rita, managed to stick around for nearly 2 decades before the ambulance came to collect her body from the bottom of the stairs one night. Albert claimed she had tripped and broke her neck, but no one on the street believed that. He was a nasty old man, and everyone saw the way he would drag her around, often shouting about how he would do away with her if he could. Several neighbors, including Madison and Steve, had stepped in on countless occasions, but Rita would shake her hand at them in a frantic wave and tell them she was fine. Everyone on the street told the cops that they believed Albert had pushed her, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears. Unfortunately, due to her age and her unsteadiness on her feet, it was ruled an accident, and she was cremated within the week. Albert scattered her ashes in the rose garden she had cultivated lovingly and delicately for so many years on her Sunday afternoons. Now, with no children, Albert lived alone, which nobody seemed to pity. He didn't deserve the company. Sheila, however, had never tied the knot. She appeared to be quite content with her own company, serving as a sharp contrast to Albert. Also without children, she filled her days creating arts and crafts on her front porch, smiling and waving at everyone who passed her by. She would whistle a cheerful tune and sing joyfully to herself, her soft voice carried by the breeze, bringing smiles to the faces of all, except for Albert, who would cuss aloud whenever the melodies reached his ears. Today, Sheila sat quietly in her bay window, no smile on her lips. The melodies of song and whistle eluded her. With a look of disdain, she observed Albert as he persisted in his familiar, grumpy demeanor. Madison watched the elderly lady grasping something tightly in her hands, toying with it. Initially, she couldn't discern what it was, but then Sheila began to talk. Though Madison struggled with the art of lip reading, it became evident that the lady's lips danced in a rhythmic cadence, as if echoing a mantra she recited over and over. Madison cast a fleeting glance back at Albert as he grappled with his balance to return upright, his movements deliberate as he turned and gradually inched his way up toward the porch. It was clear that the years had not been kind to him. Madison needed to check on the lamb and prepare the special Easter breakfast before the children stirred, yet she found herself unable to look away from the window, the view inexplicably entrancing her. She peered back over at Sheila and noticed her now holding the object out in front of her, with a finger and a thumb pinching it on either side. It was a bone, appearing larger than the birds and mice she typically used for her taxidermy projects, perhaps a remnant from a rabbit. Madison nearly stifled a laugh at the irony of it being a rabbit bone during the Easter season, yet something about it sent chills down her spine as well, causing the hairs on her body to stand on end. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Sheila had used bones in her crafts before, and it had never bothered Madison, but this was different. Sheila's lips curled into a smile, yet it was far from her usual radiant beam. Instead, it resembled a grimace that contorted her entire face into an unnatural form. Her eyes remained fixated on Albert, unwavering and unblinking. Madison's heart began to race as she watched the old lady snap the rabbit bone in half. The piercing sound of Albert's screams pulled her focus away from Sheila and back to the old man. Madison turned her eyes just in time to witness him plummet and collide heavily with the earth. A resounding thud could be heard throughout the street as his head ricocheted off his concrete path. Madison recoiled in shock, her hand flying to her mouth to suppress the startled yelp that sought to break free. Sure, Madison disliked the elderly man, but she took no pleasure in watching his injury. She stood from her armchair and placed her coffee cup on the side table. She pushed her feet into her fluffy bunny slippers and rushed to the front door. Stepping outside, she tied the belt of her robe and hurried over to Albert, calling out to him. The old man seemed unresponsive at first, but as Madison placed her hand on his back in an attempt to check on him, he suddenly came to and swatted her hand away aggressively. "I'm fine," he snapped, as he placed his hands in front of him and forced his way onto his knees, his whole body trembling as he did so. "Mr. Stone, please let me help you up." "Silly woman, I said I'm fine," he growled, trying to lift himself back up. Madison ignored his typical nastiness as she placed her arm around him and guided him to his feet. "For goodness sake," he said as he pushed Madison away. "What is your problem? I'm just trying to help you," Madison complained as she struggled to keep her footing. For an old man, he was strong, especially considering how injured he appeared, with blood dripping from the gash in his forehead. He was certainly strong enough to push a frail old lady down the stairs. "Who asked for your help? Don't you have naughty orphans to try and tame? Piss off." Madison couldn't believe how ungrateful he was being. "Fuck this," she muttered. "Drop dead, you nasty old bastard." Madison stormed back to her house, ignoring the old man's wincing as he hobbled back to his. As she stepped inside, she couldn't help but glance over at Sheila's window before closing the door. Sheila was still there, watching. The elderly lady smiled pleasantly and waved at her. Madison tried her hardest to return the same energy as she smiled and waved back, but she was trembling uncontrollably. She closed the door and made her way to the kitchen. It was time to check the lamb. Madison battled to steady her quaking hands as she began preparing breakfast. The children would soon be awake, and she was determined to ensure they had a nutritious meal before diving into their Easter goodies. As much as she tried to focus on all the cooking she needed to do, her mind kept replaying the image of Sheila snapping that bone, and the ear-piercing sound of Albert's scream that had followed. As she whisked the eggs, she could have sworn the room around her had darkened. She looked through the window and saw that the sun had retreated behind thick gray clouds, causing the world outside to become a gloomy sight. Something else caught her attention. Albert was outside. He had one hand holding a tea towel over his forehead, whilst using his other hand to fight with the garden hose. He must have been trying to clean up the blood from his path. Madison shook her head at the silly old man fumbling to unravel the hose. She decided to go back to the bay window to retrieve her coffee to help her get through breakfast. She kicked her slippers off next to her chair and picked up her cup. Typical. Its contents were now cold. Something deep within her urged her to look back across at Sheila's house. The old lady was still at her window. She was now wrapping twine around her index and middle finger and pulling it tight. Madison felt like someone had just punched her in the gut as she ran back to the kitchen window. Albert was writhing on his back lawn. The hose was somehow wrapped around his neck and was strangling him. His face was deep blue and pulsing from the pressure. With a startled cry, Madison released her mug, which bounced off the wooden floor miraculously unscathed before landing squarely upon her foot. With a determined gait, she limped to her back door and flung it open. Moving on instinct, she prepared to dart outside to save the old man yet again, but a sudden, fierce gust of wind cruelly slammed the door shut, trapping her inside. She pulled with all her might, yet it remained steadfast. All she could do was return to the window, nearly slipping on her spilled coffee, and watch in despair. Looking on from the pane of glass separating them, Madison watched Albert break free and begin to crawl across his lawn. With urgency, she dashed to the front window once again, her stare fixated on Sheila as she released the twine and retrieved a jar filled with earth. Setting it gently upon her windowsill, she then grabbed an egg and cracked it open into the jar. With a swift motion, she replaced the lid and began to shake the jar vigorously. Madison's mind raced, struggling to fathom the implications this might hold for Albert. Yet a palpable certainty coursed through her. Sheila harbored sinister intentions for the unsuspecting old fool. Exhausted from the back and forth, and with a throbbing foot, Madison returned to the back window to find Albert had not moved from the lawn. The once serpentine hose now lay lifeless by his feet, yet a different spectacle unfolded. The fierce wind intensified, but it seemed confined only in his yard. Forming a siphon, it targeted Rita's now wild and tangled roses, lifting the earth into its voracious embrace. Madison wanted to try the back door once more, but she knew it would be in vain, so she simply watched as the wind settled, leaving the dust to form a figure, the silhouette of a lady. Albert lifted his injured head to see the phantom approaching him. Slowly at first, Madison watched the old man's face become visibly upset as he uttered the word, "Rita?" Suddenly, the specter picked up pace, charging at him. It began to tear him apart, pulling at his flesh and slinging it across the garden. Madison wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat, leaving her silent as she watched the old man be dismembered in front of her. Nothing but his skeleton remained once the dust settled upon him, leaving him shrouded in the ashes. Madison heard the pitter-patter of her children's feet racing down the stairs, excited that the Easter bunny had visited. She quickly lifted her jaw back up and wiped the tears from her eyes. "Mommy, are you okay?" Jess, her youngest, asked when stepping into the kitchen. Madison spun to face her and forced a smile. "Yes, baby, Mommy is fine. I just dropped my coffee mug on my foot and hurt it." Her eldest, Reese, grabbed the mop and shovel from the closet. "I'll get that for you, Mom." "Thanks, sweetie," she said as she stepped to one side. She couldn't believe how sweet and helpful they were being. "I will finish making breakfast, and then we can see what the Easter Bunny has left." All the children let out a gleeful cheer as they began to help in the kitchen. Suddenly, there was a knock. Cheerful raps upon the door. Madison walked cautiously to answer it. There, standing on the porch, was Sheila. She was dressed in a yellow floral dress, looking like her usual cheery self. She held a hamper basket filled with bunny and chick plushies, and Easter eggs and a bouquet of flowers, wrapped perfectly with a lilac bow. "Happy Easter, Madison," she smiled. Madison, shell-shocked from the morning's events, tried her hardest to force a smile. "Happy Easter, Miss Lamond." "I hope you don't mind, but I put together an Easter hamper for you and the children," the old lady said as she extended the gift to Madison. Thank you ever so much," Madison stammered. You didn't have to." "It was my pleasure." Sheila smiled once more, then turned to leave. She looked over her shoulder and said in a hushed tone, "Rita was my dearest friend, you know?" Madison couldn't find the words to reply, so she simply nodded understandingly. Taking the hamper inside, Madison could not help but wonder if there may be something wrong with the gifts. She took it into the dining room and carefully removed one of the mini eggs. She unwrapped it from its shiny foil and tapped it on the corner of the table, half expecting blood to rush out of it all over the cream carpet. She was relieved to discover it was simply a hollow chocolate egg. Madison ran to look out the kitchen window, only to find Albert's garden empty. Although she could not shake the uneasy feeling she had, she focused on enjoying the day with her children. And life got better after that. After that Easter, the children began behaving better, and they all seemed much happier. CPS closed their file, and Madison and her children were finally free to move on and to heal. Nobody ever found Albert, and his house was later returned to the bank and sold to a single father with 2 children. The 2 families became very close and supported one another with a bright future and the possibility of blending into one family. Madison truly felt like she had a guardian angel watching over her, although she knew never to cross Sheila. Alexandra's Easter Nightmare by Mackey. Easter was fast approaching the town of Spring River. Caretaker of the Gilcrest Cemetery, Alexandra Harks, was making the rounds under a setting sun when she received the shock of a lifetime. A silver, shimmering portal forming in between and a few feet above the gravestones of a pair of long-deceased town founders, drilling Alexandra with a wave of immense nervousness. Within seconds following the formation of this portal, escaping from it, such beings which defied all logic. Creeping out of the opening, humanoid-sized monsters, resembling actual Easter bunnies. Alarmingly, they had sharp, dangerous claws for hands, long stalactite teeth jutting from their mouths, piercing red eyes, Without delay, these bizarre Easter Bunny monsters began a mad dash straight for her. All the while, they released a bone-chilling wail. This triggered Alexandra to spin around as fast as she could and make a break for it. The sounds they made as they communicated with each other unnerving her. Unfortunately for Alexandra, due to her lack of interest in physical activity, she grew tremendously winded and exerted right away, allowing these monsters, these terrible Easter bunnies, to catch up to her. Her body broke out in a biting pain as a pair of them in the lead inserted those unsavory-looking claws into her shoulders. She began to feel her own warm, sticky blood start to seep from the wounds and stream down her back. The next thing Alexandra knew, the monster Easter bunny, who dug its claws into her right shoulder, breathed into her right ear. This made her lapse instantly into unconsciousness. Alexandra's eyes fluttered open. Staring down onto herself, her face broke out in immense panic as she realized she was now strapped down onto a medical exam table. Brown leather straps wrapped around her wrists and ankles. Now contained in a cage with bars, her outer clothes had been removed, and she knew she was not on Earth. Indicated by a pair of bright, aqua blue suns beaming down on her. Making matters so much worse, all around her, surrounding her cage, a legion of those bizarre bunny rabbits, all of them releasing that unnerving wail. Inside the cage with her, one of them stood over her, gripping a dangerous-looking scalpel. An actual extraterrestrial Easter bunny was about to slice her open. She frowned as it began to maneuver the scalpel straight for her stomach. Easter Dream, a holiday fantasy in 2 parts, by Rob Tannahill. Part 1. Jo Feel soared through the sky, her flight invisible. The date, December 24th, in the dark morning. A jolly, rotund red man flew through the sky just ahead of her. The angelic Bond agent hummed as she flew, excited. It was time to start over. That meant collecting the fallen. She'd been given a blade for the task, one twist to drop the veil, another to give it flesh. The knife made it fun. Of the 22 fallen, each Bond agent was given 4 warrants, and Jo Feel wouldn't stop until they'd all been captured. The last one, Ramuel, had been a reluctant pain in the ass, flitting about the world pretending to be Cupid, shooting men and women with the arrows of lovelessness, divorce, and discord. The idiot actually thought he could use one on her. She chuckled now, remembering his failure. Now, Jo Feel had only one Bond in her way before she could get down to her real business, and his ass was hers. This slimeball she trailed now, this one would give her a thrill. If any of them deserved what was coming, it was this, whatever he was. Not a demon, but no angel would cross the line Kokobeel had crossed. When she entered his line of sight, she ignited her aura. The fallen angel only had time to gasp. "Gotcha, bitch!" Jo Feel collided with Kokobeel's soft chest like a tackle smashing a running back. Her dagger slid through his hammy shoulder, and she twisted it once. Who the fuck? The demon reindeer hustling his sack-laden sleigh through the sky exploded into black dust. The sleigh splintered into bits of wood, and the sack, which was screaming, was fired higher into the air by the blast. Jophiel snatched Kokobeel by his throat, then shot upward and snatched the sack before it could begin a deadly descent back to Earth. A bolt shot from her aura, locking Kokobeel's magnetic field with hers. With all in her safe grip, she went lax. Angel, devil, and the screaming sack began to fall. Kokobeel, the jolly Saint Nick mask gone, sneered at her with his smooth obsidian face. "What is this nonsense?" he asked. "A reckoning. 12,000 years is more than enough." "The great angelic arrest, is it? How proud you must be." Jophiel held the screaming sack up to his face. "You know the punishment for this. Time to pay the piper." She gripped his head and howled. Electricity flooded both their fields. Kokobeel screamed and his face boiled. They continued to fall. "Where is Samyaza?" The fallen angel's slack, split lips spread over teeth black like dice. "Ha! Sammy, where are you?" he sang. "Still looking for your coxman, are we? Missing the jackrabbit staccato?" She sent another, harder bolt through his field. Oil flowed from his mouth as he began to choke. "I have no clue where that hippie is," Kokobeel screamed. "He's an alchemist. He's a nomad. He's a popular 60s free love song with a fat white belly and a giant pink head. What do you think he's up to?" Jophiel looked down. "You'd better talk, or you're going to splat." "I can't go splat, idiot. Like you, I share." Jophiel plunged the smooth dagger, made of mercury, made of the unified field, into Kokobeel's open mouth. He shuddered, gripped her shoulders with his black hands, and began to writhe against her field, stuck to her like glue. The black flesh he was once made of pinked and turned into white flesh. Blonde hair grew from his skull, and his eyes blazed blue. No glamours, angelic form revoked, more human than human. His eyes rolled toward his flat, vulnerable chest. This time, his scream was genuine. "What sort of miserable dirk have you stuck in me?" "A new kind. Earth's right there, you son of a bitch. If you don't want to go splat and fucking live through it." "I don't know, I swear, I don't know where he is." "Lies. Jophiel. He's a fucking man-sized bunny rabbit that everyone worships in the spring. What the fuck do you want from me? I pay him no mind. I don't like hippies. They're foul and they... You kill kids, you piece of shit." When they hit the earth, Jophiel landed no harder than a child jumping off a bed. Kokobeel, however, exploded into a mess of blood, guts, and chunks of flesh. Bone shards zinged across the desert, making sonic sounds like bullets. At her feet lie a brain, eyes laden on pink and yellow strings, and a spinal cord. These wriggled together in the sand, and she spit on them. "That ought to keep you moist until the bugs eat you." "Don't worry, they'll shit you right back to the source." Kokobeel's remains emitted a little squeal. Jophiel opened the sack. A young girl's face, dirty and flushed, stared up at her, stunned. The angel cooed. "It's just a nightmare, baby," she said. With a wave of her hand, she sent the child home to her snug little bed. The Avenger spat on Kokobeel again. "Piece of shit. Fuck you, Santa." "Send me home, please," the brain eked. "It hurts." Jophiel began to walk. Now to find the fucking dope rabbit. She looked up. A little help, you think? Nothing, as per. Shit. She began humming. 3 steps, and she winked out of existence. Anyone watching would have thought they'd seen a ghost. When Carl showed up at the lab, his girl Kathy was there already, staring at the ceiling with her hands in front of her face, fingers waggling. Carl chuckled and waved at her. She giggled and jumped up, her eyes bugging like UFOs. "Hi, baby, look. Look how much we did today." "It's about 500. Sammy, chemist and possible Easter bunny, was loafing on the sofa in a Hawaiian shirt, not watching the news, which was playing on mute. The platinum chain around his neck somehow didn't clash with the plastic lays he was wearing. His long ears poked up from the sides of a modified fishing hat. Hooks had been worked into the bands, and buttons with marijuana leaves on them mingled with more buttons, whose slogans Sammy had written himself. Christ hates Trump. Musk is a cunt. Happy Easter. A blunt jutted from between his teeth, and he puffed away for a moment, then blew out a fast, huge cloud of citrus and pine. "Shit, I gotta go," the bunny said. "I need more etorphine." "I can get you some ether if you..." "Etorphine. Nowhere else to get that shot. Not that I'll fuck with, savvy. Giant bunnies walking through the ghetto. Can you dig that? Ha!" His eyes widened enough to expose the whites, and he looked almost like the happy holiday rabbit his image had inspired long ago. "They sell it out there, like in the vial?" Carl asked. "You know where? I could go get it for you. Carl, then I would have to pay. Don't you see? Fucking pay. Are you kidding?" The Easter bunny's nose twitched, and he gave a great nasal snork. "What fucking day is it?" Carl thought for a second. "It's, April... Holy shit. Tomorrow's Easter, Sammy." The rabbit shot straight up in his seat, the blunt flying from his paw. It landed in Carl's lap, and he picked it up and dragged from it as if it were all perfectly normal, which it was. "Easter?" Sammy asked, beginning to undress. His hat flew, and Carl caught it, setting it on the coffee table amidst the detritus of various parties, both past and ongoing. "Great Scott, I have to go." "Sammy," Carl began to ask, but a furry white paw shot up into the air and folded itself into something like a middle finger. Carl closed his mouth and let Sammy leave the way he wanted to, without explanation. Fun times were ending. He could feel it. And he didn't want to tell Carl that. Paranoia, not at all a thing a fallen angel would be prone to, was creeping in again, as it had long ago during the earliest days of Christianity. The last time he felt this way, the pagans burned. Long ago, or yesterday. His memory banks said they were the same. 12 is quite a few millennia. Samyaza looked up. "Must you, O great eye, ever be a bastard?" He sniffed. Damn drill sergeant. Not bad enough to be turned into a rabbit just for showing humans how to smoke something that might make them learn things like, I don't know, speech? Perhaps critical thinking? "Yes, Samyaza, you did indeed give them speech. You also gave them abandon." Holy shit. The Lord doth speak. The angel in him kneeled. "You're being arraigned, angel." "I did not give them abandon. I gave them consciousness, and they chose abandon. That's on you, Dr. Free Will." "So did I really lead anyone astray?" "You did. You gave them addiction. I made their brains, and you taught them to sully what I made with vulgar need. Naughty little rabbit. Drugs are for medicine. I put medicine here in case humans are injured. not so they can abandon their families and go party. Lust is Asmodea's department, he said. Stop blaming me for hell's bullshit. With a grunt, he stood and continued down the dark streets and into the back of the city, where all was grim. There was a shimmer, and the rabbit disappeared. You realize I also brought them to you, yes? I assume you take credit for Bill Hicks? Grinning, he lit a joint. And what about this, You know your golden boy Mackey has popped in a time or two for a puff over the ages. He waved the smoke around in the air. So what about it? Or are the rules different when you're a twat? What are you after this evening, Briar Rabbit? It isn't that. Oh, piss up a rope. He flapped his paw at the night sky and resumed walking. Sammy loved what he did for a living. First, making calmatives for the barbarians. In those days, they called him Euster and thought he was a girl, which was fine with him. This kept the men from making a meal of him. Whole crowds danced around towering bonfires together, sipping from his potions, enjoying orgies, celebrating life and love, until the newcomers came and visited their bloody fires on the pagans. In the ancient days of alchemy, living in the basements of various monasteries had felt like a curse, especially as a 6-foot rabbit, whom most people assumed was an agent of Satan. A time or two, Sammy had been held hostage and enslaved for his ability to make potions. Oh well. And maybe the orgies hadn't been the best idea. After all, that's when Jophiel had left him. Not much on sharing, Jophiel. Whatever. That was ancient history. Let her come for him now, appointed to capture the fallen. He had to admit, he had missed her face, and he suspected she would at least be pleased to hear of his everlasting celibacy since those early days of carnal pleasure. That loss is directly on you, Samyaza, thundered the voice from on high. That loss is directly on you, Sammy, he mocked. Yes, I'm gathering that. I care about as much as I did 10 minutes ago. No more words from the Most High whatever. The hospital loomed, glowing softly under the sepia tones given off by the lamps lining the road. Though he could see himself, no camera would see him when he entered through the ER. There was no one that he could see working behind the wide beige desk. Even if there were someone manning the technology there, they'd just think the electronic doors were suffering a glitch when they opened, invisible as he was. The electronics wheezed, and Samyaza crossed the threshold. All hospitals were brighter than they needed to be. Probably because intense light made people think they had a better chance to live through whatever disease brought them to this way station between the worlds. The ex-lieutenant of the Fallen traveled, not really walking in this form, more floating in search of the key word, which would be dangling from a ceiling-bound plaque. Pharmacy. And there were always doors, heavy steel, locked like everything else in this life, coated like his enchanted rabbit DNA, cold like his sex life over the ages. Many deep breaths now. Clear the mind. Let go of the better days. Stop thinking of all the psychedelic lives you errantly built, and just chill. Imagine molecules, little dots that turn into nothing more than sweet vibration. Sound passes through all things. Samyaza reduced himself to a quantum wave and rippled through the subatomic pores in the steel. He floated among the shelves in search of his prize, passing the medicine, stuff that keeps you alive, blood pressure and the like, passing the hydrocodone, even the Oxycontin. This was going to be in the back where it was cold. Samyaza's eyes bore into the steel freezer, and he studied its contents until he found what he wanted. Time to do the dirty. Since God had seen fit to make him a marsupial, he had to smuggle his contraband out the old-fashioned way. Thus spoke the Lord. Classy. Fuck, really? Now? His aura crackled and popped like his energy field was running off a low battery signal. Oh shit. Without further ado, he transubstantiated through the door again, hurrying out of the hospital with his prize. That had never happened. Suddenly, he wasn't so sure about all the eyes in the sky not seeing him. Oh, that prick. You sold me out, he said, once he was out of the hospital. The Lord was silent. Part 2. Another seedy hotel room in another seedy neighborhood. 4 months since Kokobeel. A whole country covered, and so far, no trace of the great pink rabbit. But Joe Field could not shake the feeling that Kokobeel had been right. It didn't take a rocket scientist to do the math. He would find a group of junkies, make them the best drug they ever had, and now you got a cult, or a crew, or a clique, or whatever humans called their tribal camaraderies these days. Multiply that by the stages of human evolution, and deducing his movements wasn't so hard. A bit painstaking, maybe, but what the hell? Perhaps it wasn't meant to be rushed. There was a cackle of static, and the television came on. The channels flipped on their own. Joe Field stood, stepping tentatively toward the plasma screen. These televisions ran on the internet. They didn't flip like this. She smiled. Finally decided to talk, huh? She asked the ceiling. The news griped momentarily and clicked over to Bugs Bunny, which then clicked over to Gordon Ramsay screaming about bad food. Finally settling on what looked to be a video of a UFO sighting over the desert. Realizing the scene looked familiar, she said, "Oh, sorry," not to herself, but to whom she knew was listening. "Just watch." She clicked her teeth, shaking her head. What a dunce she'd been. Fucking ghost shows, duh. What other way was there to catch a paranormal being when you had nothing to go on? Bless these new spiritualist fools. On the TV, she watched herself collide with Kokobeel in midair, then fall to the earth. The event indeed resembled a UFO crash. And when Joe Field stood away from what had been left of Kokobeel, there was a shimmer, and what looked like a glittering gray alien took a few steps, then disappeared. She rubbed her face, chuckling. Oops. Luckily, they didn't make much of a fuss about it, and one of the male commenters called it obvious AI. Angels did occasionally like a drink while roaming the 3D. So when the show cut to commercial, she made herself a small screwdriver and sat at the table to wait out the stupid advertisements. Poor humans. They needed none of the crap they sold each other. It was her hapless husband who had introduced them to their new god, need. Hence the time of the great goodbye. Yet Samyaza's actions, though oblivious, had not been to cause all this greed. Her poor, stupid husband. He just wanted to have a good time. But look at what the good time did. What swine were empowered by speedy drugs, hallucinogens, infected with the hubris to tyrannize? She tried to warn him against it. His answer had been to show the humans anyway. Why? And why the hell was she thinking like she didn't still hate his philandering ass? She slammed the empty glass on the table and growled. He was a loser, a drug-addicted, sad, orgy-inventing loser, and he deserved everything that was coming. Everything. Joe Field's head whipped toward the screen again, where a woman named Sapphire Sandalo was squinting at a video only she could see, cut to the interior of a hospital pharmacy. The screen then cut to the interior of a hospital pharmacy. Something that shimmered was floating between the steel shelves. It looked like it had horns. "Are those bunny ears?" Sandalo asked. She started to laugh, and the show cut back to the inside of the pharmacy where the bottle was floating through the air. It hovered around what looked like the rabbit's midsection and slowly disappeared. "Did he just put that in his prison purse?" asked one of the Ghost Brothers, according to the legend at the bottom of the screen. He leaned forward, cringing. Oh my God. Easter Bunny got a habit. They cut to another commenter whose green eyes twinkled above a smile that broadened almost reluctantly across her reddening face. No effing way, dude, I did not just see that. Although that's really strange, it's not even the best part of this, another commenter said. It looks like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it looks like as the specter is leaving, it sprouts black wings. Jophiel stared, frozen. The ER's electric doors opened and the giant rabbit shape floated forward. There was a flash, the lights flickered, and just for a moment, she saw very broad, very black, very old wings. The image disappeared, the doors closed, and that was it. But the text at the bottom of the screen now read Chattanooga, Tennessee. The television clicked off. Finally. Gotcha, bitch. And, except for her strangely leaking eyes, it felt good. While Carl set everything up, Kathy bubbled her way around the park, inviting everybody to the Easter Dream Bash. Sam Yaza watched out the window as Carl set up the picnic table, a crappy volleyball net, and patio chairs, all taken from storage. Voices brought his eyes over to Kathy. She was on the porch about 100 yards away, talking excitedly to a young couple who probably hadn't paid their rent in 3 months. But that was okay. The rabbit took care of all that, and they were all about to meet him. He watched as the couple first laughed at her, and then joined her. That must have been the part of the conversation involving free drugs. No one believed they really knew the Easter Bunny. This was going to be fun. Speaking of which, he had to make the Kool-Aid. Electric it would be. Why? He was a very giving rabbit, and a much more generous angel. He put his mirror shades up on the brim of his hat, telling himself it was their scratched lenses that blurred his vision, and began mixing tonight's refreshments. His throat clutched. This was going to be his last batch. No way for it to be otherwise. When God tells you the gig is up, you can believe what you want and get the bone anyway. He knew this, and therefore, there was really only one thing to do. Throw the best Easter bash the Shady Oak Trailer Park had ever seen or would ever see. They wouldn't remember it, but that was beside the point. He would. And he'd need the sentiment to pass the time in the void. Fuck. He turned away from his mixture and wiped his eyes. Can't have a tear landing in the recipe. It was always fun to watch the crystals melt into the liquid. Carl wanted them to have a rabbit, so they would. Pink would be okay, even though the song calls for a white one. By the time he came to life, no one would be sure what color he was anyway. Carl came back inside around the time Sam Yaza finished making the electric drink. He wasted no time grabbing a mug. "You're gonna have to make more," he said, dunking his mug. "No, this will be enough," Sam Yaza said. Carl's shoulders slumped. "Ah, geez, Sammy. They comin'?" "They're already here, Bubba." He covered his black lips with his large fluffy paw and coughed into it. "No worries, I'm going to have good fun with people before it's over, and that'll do." He stretched his heavy, pink arms over his head and grunted. "Well, I'm feeling it, so you must be fucked up by now. Let's go outside. I'm gonna give you a great introduction, man." An image of his friend's stoic tears broke into tiny fragments and floated before the bunny's eyes. Pixelated explosions of white, pink, and green, bordered with silver, consumed all visible reality. His friend met him on the steps outside the trailer, the man's face elongating, separating, and releasing a wash of silver stars into the ether around him. When they touched his aura, they began a fast chromatic orbit. Carl smiled, and the yawning hole his mouth made looked like a lemon wedge. Sam Yaza laughed, a hearty baritone. This is why he made Easter Dream. Carl's face flattened and blackened, his eyes dark holes with white spirals running through them. "You ready?" he asked in a robot's voice. Carl whirled around on the steps and barked incoherent words. Judging by the faces of the people, they were good ones. And Sam Yaza, for the first time in a very long time, revealed himself, walking down the patio steps to join the party, a little unsure of his step. The stares were melting, and he couldn't stop laughing. The world laughed with him. The 10 or 12 people who joined their day trip, gasping and rubbing their eyes, some laughing. Carl took his paw. "Happy Easter, Sammy." Carl couldn't help but remember the day he met Sammy. Every time he saw well, he wasn't really a man, now was he? It was March 5th, 2020, when Carl, trailer park supervisor and bathtub crank cook extraordinaire, stumbled upon a strange squatter taking residence in one of the forgotten abandoned trailers at the back of the park. At first, he thought he was dreaming. A giant pink bunny, dressed in a leather coat and a green scarf, was building a table with a hammer and nails, and there was a dusty, or rather powdery, piece of machinery that looked like a screaming steel box wearing a funnel, seated on the kitchen counter. The power was off, but the bunny had his own little workbench light plugged into a small battery-powered generator. Both were in the middle of the shitty green carpet and cast an eerie glow that put Carl in the mind of his own at-home setup. He'd opened his mouth to speak, and a wad of bills flew across the room, landing at Carl's feet. Though a bit frightened, this was a giant bunny after all. He picked up the money, counted it to $1,000, and only asked, "What you got there, man?" Not that he needed to ask. Most trailer park supervisors know a pill press when they see one. "Money," the giant rabbit said. "That's called cash. You want in?" His big black eyes showed only bare glimmers of white like a dog's. "Who are you, man?" "Well, therein lies a story." He handed Carl a white pill. "Chew this first, though. Trust me." "Ain't gotta twist my arm." Carl followed instructions. "My name is Sam Yaza. You can call me Sammy. Fact, I used to be the Easter Bunny." And his strange new friend had spilled his divine autobiography. What Carl ate was a blotter of Easter dream. The rest is, well, you can guess. An angel who was a rabbit and was his friend descended the steps now. Carl whirled like a carnival showman, letting the sideways lash of his arm through the air turn him on one foot. His balance somehow perfect when he slid off the last step into the grass, which was blue. Pink light exploded from the ground. "Ladies and gentlemen, the no fucking bullshit Easter Bunny." Carl's eyes widened as visible ether escaped the mouths of those who gasped. Sammy stood at the foot of the patio steps and let the people pet him. "Are you really the Easter Bunny?" a woman asked. "I am, but I forgot to make eggs for you all," Sammy said, owning the whole bunny shtick in a way he had not done in centuries. "But there's plenty of Kool-Aid." "You know what we could do instead of eggs?" "Tell me," the woman said, fully reverting back to her childhood. Most of the adults had, by the look of things. Carl held Kathy close and kissed her on the cheek. "Ain't no one gonna remember this," he said. "Best Easter they ever had, and it's all gonna be lost in the wind." A whole group of tripping daisies followed the rabbit into the woods at the back of the trailer park. His giant paws pointed out fairies that weren't really there. While they hunted, Sammy the Easter Bunny talked of ancient days where fairies flew in the woods, trolls were real, and people danced to female gods. Probably no one even heard what he was saying, but that didn't matter right now. Carl held Kathy close. All was well, until he started to choke. Kathy screamed, backing away. Jophil lifted Carl off the ground, baring her teeth. She was in full angel form, glimmering pinks and golds and blues that never stopped moving, her eyes pure gold. "Where is the fucking rabbit?" "In the woods," Carl croaked. "Please, lady," Kathy said. "He's all I got in this whole stupid world." Jophil glowered at her and let Carl go. He crumpled to the ground. She sneered at Kathy and headed toward the trees. Those who'd not gone on the hunt gasped. Someone got too close to the angel and she knocked him into a tree, not to kill him, but to stun. "Stay back," the voice came from the woods. "Joey?" "Don't you fucking call me Joey!" She attacked Samyaza, took her tackle and rolled across the forest floor. Electric pain coursed through his body. His fur exploded with waves of fire. Electric pain coursed through his body. His fur exploded with waves of fire, burning the woods surrounding and burning her body, which shimmered like melting mirrors. Samyaza smiled. "I missed you," he said. "Shut the fuck up!" Her fist collided with his face, harder this time. Colors exploded from his mouth and splashed against a burning tree, sizzling. Then it burst into flames that seemed to jump from tree to tree. A wave of fire coated the grass at the edge of the woods, and the partygoers screamed, rushing for their trailers. Samyaza craned his short neck the best he could to see. "Honey, if you don't mind, put that fire out. It's going to reach the lab. If that happens, you just killed the whole park." The fist again. Wham! Samyaza croaked. What fur had been ripped from his face under her assault showed the obsidian of his true skull. "You should really put it out." Joe Field growled in his face, then pushed herself up off his shoulders, inhaling as she rose. She bellowed, ice flying from her pink mouth and over the fire. The trees froze. The fire faded into smoke that rose from the ground like morning fog. "There. You happy, dickhead? I didn't trash your lab. I suppose you want me to let you go so you can go get high and maybe fuck the whole trailer park, hmm?" She leaned into his face. "I'm not letting you go, loser. I'm feeding you back to the source like I did your friends. You fucked up the whole of creation. Did you know that? No, it wouldn't occur to a moron like you. Nothing I love more than an intelligent, tough woman. Oh, holy heaven, that's it." She snatched him up from the forest floor. "I'm so done. You know you missed me." She scoffed. "Missed what? Those fuzzy dice? Ha!" She spun him around. "March." The bravest of the partygoers were standing at the edge of the woods, watching. "Sorry, kids," Joe Field said. "Party's over. I'm taking this criminal to jail now. If you don't fucking want to go too, stay back." "You don't have to be a dick to them," Samyaza said. "I'm going peacefully. You gonna slide that knife in or what?" Joe Field blinked. "Of course I know about the knife. Who do you think made it?" She shoved the knife into the region above his fluffy belly, where it would hurt the most. "How is the meat suit anyway? You have a solar plexus? You have a liver? How's that feel?" She drove the knife deeper, and Samyaza began to sweat pure light. His fur grew into itself, revealing obsidian skin. His red eyes blazed at his friends, a golden slit carving its way down their orbs, until he looked like what he was. A slick, dark lizard. Something slightly less worthless than Kokobeel. She twisted the knife again. Nothing happened. "Like I said, I made it," he croaked. "Can't make me human. You'll have to. Sam, if you do not shut up." She grabbed the air around her face in an all-too-human gesture of frustration. He brightened. There was Joey. "Can I do one thing before we go?" She knew what he had in mind. No, fuck you, fuck them. Samyaza snatched Carl, who was close by the forehead. The trailer park supervisor screamed. There was a flash. The trailer park supervisor woke up in bright light. The first thing he saw were paintings of cherubim on walls that were not at all made of cheap paneling. Something about these blankets was different. They were too smooth. His skin felt too nice, cleaner, and he wasn't need sick at all. Usually he needed something in the morning. A lone pill sat on a table made of marble. Carl touched it to make sure he wasn't dreaming. The bedroom itself was almost the size of his whole trailer. He knocked at the table and did something not even he noticed. He walked away from the pill like he'd never seen it. When Carl stepped into the hallway, he saw a gilded balustrade running alongside carpeted steps of a sort that he'd only seen in films. And 2 stories? Oh fuck, was it 3? He ran back into the bedroom, his heart skipping a beat. Kathy was right where she should be, sleeping on the right side of the bed. Baby doll, get up, man. We're fucking clampets. She stirred on the bed. Babe, what are you mumbling? Oh my lord, these sheets. That ain't even all of it. Come on. They spent the day exploring their new mansion, for that's what it was. Both decided it would be best to soak in whatever the angel had done as his last act of kindness. Best not to say anything. They had rich grandparents. That would be the story, if they needed one. There was no time for such thoughts. It was still Easter after all. And just maybe, some of the naughtier angels might finally be getting a taste of forgiveness. As the sun set, Kathy and Carl sat on their stunning back patio, bigger than any they'd ever seen, and listened to the frogs croak.